Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Soraya, for those of you that don't know, and today I'll be discussing how I lived in 3 countries by the age of 25. If you're new here, I started moving abroad when I was 22 and continued it on and off until I was 25. And so I just want to share my experience, what it was like. For those of you that might be thinking about moving abroad, I'm going to share some tips and tricks that I learned. And yeah, just kind of share some insight and see if it'll help someone else. All right, so first, why did I move abroad? So specifically, I moved to Spain first when I was 22. I wanted to be an au pair, so I had researched different programs. I was actually helping a friend out where she was interested in moving abroad, and so I was helping her with that, and I found this program that I thought was great for myself as well. And so yeah, I ended up moving to Alicante and Madrid for about 2 months to be an au pair. Then I also moved to Greece. That was the next time I moved abroad. I was 24. So I had taken some time off, but I had moved abroad to specifically Athens to be a student. And then finally, right after that, I moved to Lisbon, Portugal, where I was there for about 2 months as well. And was kind of just like working and traveling there at the same time. Another reason as to why I moved to all of these places is because I loved the weather. I feel like from what I researched and what I heard, the weather was just so ideal. Coming from the East Coast, you experience all of the seasons, but I don't necessarily want to always experience all the seasons. So it was nice to be somewhere that was more Mediterranean, more coastal. That was a huge plus, and it plays a huge role in how you feel and your personality and just how you move about life. And so I found that it was really, really helpful to be in sunny, warm, welcoming, and exciting places. Next question I get is, what is the visa process? So specifically for Spain, I didn't have a visa process, which was really nice. I was only there as a tourist, specifically to be an au pair, but as a tourist. So because I was only there for the summer, it was up to 3 months. So I only was there, I think, about 2 months. Since it was under the 90-day tourist visa requirement, I didn't have to apply for a visa. Specifically for Greece, there was a whole student visa process that I had to go through. I started that process in March, which was around the time when I started to look into moving into Greece. I began that process in March and then went to school by September. So for Greece, the visa process took about 6 to 8 months. And that included me having to do an application, which there was an application fee, of course. I had to do fingerprinting. I had to get medical clearance from my doctor, as well as get health insurance that I could have abroad, do an interview, and yeah, essentially just pack up my life and go. So that whole process took about 6 to 8 months. With Portugal, thankfully, there was also no visa process because I was only planning to be there for up to 90 days. I had gone right after my student visa had ended, so I was planning to be there up to 3 months. I had only been there about 2 months, which was great, but yeah, no need for a visa there, so it was nice because again, you can be in the Schengen zone for up to 90 days. What jobs did I work? So in Spain, I worked as an au pair, which if you want to see more about that process, I talk about that in an earlier video with a few of my friends that I had made along the way. But yeah, so in Spain, I was working part-time, about 5 or 6 hours a day. And that was Monday through Friday, and I earned about $80, 80 euros, $80. They were pretty equivalent at the time, which was not a lot. So I definitely saved up before moving because I knew I wanted to move and travel while I was there. So I just wanted to have that flexibility because I knew that au pairing wasn't going to pay me a lot. But au pairing did include housing and transportation and food, so that's why the pay was so low. For Greece and Portugal, I worked completely remotely because with my student visa, you're not allowed to work for a Greek company, which I was fine with. So I needed to basically have a job going into the program. So I had gotten a job prior to moving there where I could work remotely from anywhere basically, which was really nice. So I worked from Greece remotely from my computer, and then same thing with Portugal. I was able to work full time. Another question I get is community. How did I meet people? Which is kind of a natural question, especially when you're moving somewhere where you're like, I don't know a single soul. With Spain, I had done a program where I was one of many, which was really nice. So we all had done different like group chats, and we're discussing like our travels and where we were planning to move, where we were specifically au pairing, because you could be an au pair in Spain or Greece or France. So in Australia, they had a bunch of other places. So yeah, because we had options, we had different group chats depending on where you were located. So I knew that there were going to be other girls in my area that I could make friends with. So we would all chat and like, hey, we want to go to this city this weekend, we want to go do this weekend, let's meet up for lunch, let's do this. So it was pretty easy to make friends that way. With Greece, I made a lot of friends through my program, which was really nice. So like day one, I had met a bunch of cool people and we had gone out for coffee and chatted and things like that. So it was kind of easy to make friends that way, at least through my program. It was a pretty small program, so we were all able to hang out as often as we wanted to, and then meet their friends if they had made friends like that had gone to the university or just, you know, that lived in the city. So it was really nice to be able to make friends that way. I had also been dating someone at the time that I had met while in Athens, and he introduced me to a bunch of his friends, and then I had made friends through them, and so it kind of just grew naturally, and I was able to build like a really great community there. With Portugal, I think Portugal was the hardest one to make friends with because I didn't know a single soul. I was going there and just kind of free falling and seeing like, okay, what happens. So I had actually done a couple of apps where they're like meetup apps or like friendship apps where you could like meet up with different people, and I hit the ground running. Like night 2, I think I was like, okay, let's meet people, let's go out, let's see what's going on, let's see what activities are going on. And it was fun. It was really fun to just be able to kind of see where it takes you. And then I also just met friends through those friends and like did different like groups and clubs and things like that. So I was only there 2 months, but it felt like I was able to build like a pretty strong community. A very real question I get is it lonely living abroad and moving abroad by yourself, especially when you're solo traveling? I think for Spain, I didn't feel that loneliness because I was living with a family, so I was just constantly around people. But of course you have those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really far away from home. And for me, that was my first time being alone, and I wasn't really used to that feeling. So I was like, okay, like, what is this gonna feel like? How am I gonna be? Like, I don't speak Spanish fluently. So I think there's that disconnect of like, okay, I'm going to start to feel lonely if I just don't speak the language, and everyone's first language isn't English, but mine is. So it I don't know, it creates a sense of like, okay, I'm going to maybe be a different version of myself abroad because there's a language barrier, because I don't have my friends and family here, even though you make friends along the way. It's just a different experience. So yeah, I would say the Spain, it was just harder to feel lonely because I was constantly living with people. And then again, I made friends with a lot of the other au pairs. So I just constantly felt like, okay, you have support in some way. And of course, you know, there's FaceTime and text messages and stuff like that, so you can still stay connected. Greece, I also felt like, because I was in school and working full time, it was just constant. It was just like a constant flow. My alone time felt more intentional, which I didn't mind. I was like, okay, I'm like actively choosing to be by myself and focused versus, okay, I'm gonna go out and hang out with friends and meet up with people. So, and I was also dating, so it was just a different experience for me, but I didn't really experience much loneliness in that sense. Portugal, I think, was where it really set in of like, oh, you're alone, like you're in this country by yourself, and what are we doing here? And I kind of liked that feeling because I truly came into the country not knowing a single person, which I liked, but it was scary. But I learned to embrace the loneliness. I think on the days where I felt really alone, I was like, okay, use this as time to really explore the city, try something new, go somewhere new. If you really want to meet people, go out and do things. Go to a cafe, go to a bar, go to a lounge, go to a comedy show. Like just finding different things that I was really maybe interested in or intrigued by, and saying, okay, do I really want to spend this alone and really like explore and see how I am by myself in a different country, or do I want to go out and meet new people and, you know, see where that leads? And so it really just depends. But I think Portugal is where I really experienced like the solitude, but kind of was able to embrace it in a new and fresh way, and that was really exciting. Okay, and related to that question is, how do the locals treat you? So this one is interesting. I would say for Spain to start, because that was my first time out of the country, it was mixed, honestly. I felt like some people were very intrigued by me because they were like, oh, your skin is different, your hair is different. There was like this genuine curiosity about my being, which I kind of liked. But there was also a sense of discrimination and biases because they didn't see a lot of people that looked like me on the daily, which is understandable. But I think I struggled with that at first, and just I think throughout it felt like, okay, are people going to discriminate against me because of my skin color, because of how I look, because of my hair, my height, whatever? I'm also short. So it was a myriad of things. I think Spain felt the most polarizing, where some people just would judge you and they didn't know you, or they'd assume I'm from a certain country when I'm from America. Like, it was just a really interesting experience. And so yeah, it was a mixed bag for the locals. A lot of people were friendly and kind and warm and welcoming, but it was mixed. It really just depends. With Greece, I found that it was also pretty mixed. I think for the most part, I felt really welcomed when people thought I was just a tourist. When people found out that I moved there, I got a million questions. Why are you moving here? What business do you have here? Why did you leave America? Like all of these questions as to like why Greece. And I had my own reasonings. I knew why I wanted to be there, but constantly having to explain and prove why I should live there was a bit exhausting. I think it felt just less welcoming in that sense of like, okay, you're welcomed as long as you're visiting, not when you move here. Yeah, that was a bit tough to experience on the daily. Like I was questioned daily from locals as to why I lived there, which is valid in some sense, but it made it harder to integrate into the society as I was actively learning Greek. I came with the intention to learn Greek, so it was just a tougher experience because I didn't understand why I was constantly being questioned, because I knew why I was there, and my other friends weren't being questioned that were also from America or from other countries. They weren't getting those same questions or those same experiences. I also think that it was a bit more segregated, so it felt more like, okay, if you're a local, you live here. If you're a tourist, you stay here. And I wanted to really integrate, and again, you look like no one there, so it was just tougher. There were Black Greeks, of course, and I became friends with a few of them as well, but it just felt like a more polarizing experience. With Portugal, I think I felt the most at home and the most welcomed. There were a lot of Black and brown people there, so a lot of the locals assumed that I lived there. They're like, oh yeah, where do you stay? What's your NIF number? And I was like, I don't have a NIF yet, but like all these things of like, okay, like just assuming that I lived there. Some people thought I was Brazilian, and I was like, no, I'm American, I'm African American. And so that felt a lot more at home. I felt a lot more at home in Portugal because there were just so many Black and brown people there. It felt so safe during the day and at night in most neighborhoods. So I loved that. I loved that experience. And I think Portugal is where I felt the most at home, the most welcomed. Locals were just so friendly, so kind. And yeah, just kind of assumed that I lived there, which I was like, wait, should I? So it was great. So this brings me into a similar question of like, how was I treated as a Black woman? What was it like as a Black woman? And yeah, so with Spain, I kind of touched on this already, but I do think that I just experienced a lot more microaggressions, a lot more assumptions were made about me based off of who people thought I was, and it was kind of uncomfortable at times, but otherwise I think people were just genuinely curious, and I liked that there was a curiosity there, especially I was working with kids and they hadn't really seen a lot of Black and brown people, so they just had questions, and I was glad to answer them because they're coming from a genuine place of not knowing versus biases or discrimination. I think there were times where like I had a taxi driver say that he didn't want to give me a ride because him and his colleagues assumed that I wouldn't pay, which was insane. And I immediately was like, I'll pay right now. But that was tough, and he's explained, he's flat out said to my face, it's because like we've had Black people and people from Africa not pay, which is insane to make that assumption, but that was something that I was told flat out. So that was really tough, and that was like very jarring to experience as someone that had never been abroad and never experienced that kind of overt racism. And so it was interesting. So I would just say like that played a part in how I felt about living in Spain. Greece, yeah, I think as a Black woman, there was I wouldn't say that I was fetishized, because that was a fear that I had because I hadn't experienced that much in Spain. With Greece, there was more of a friendliness, but also this feeling of like separate but equal, and I didn't really like that feeling. And again, that was just my experience. All of this is just my experience, and so it felt a bit more separate, which again, I will dive in. I think I will actually dive into this deeper as to why I left Greece. That kind of flows into why I left Greece, because I was planning to stay there about 2 years and I only stayed for a semester. Still got straight A's, don't make a mistake about that, but I didn't end up staying. So I can dive deeper into why I specifically left Greece if that's helpful, or just can give more insight, because there was a lot of reasons outside of just being a Black woman as to why I left, so I can dive into that in a different video. And Portugal, I touched on this earlier as well, but I feel like that is where I saw the most people that looked like me, which was so refreshing coming from Greece, where I felt like, okay, it was kind of like rare, or maybe every other day I'd see someone, maybe one or two people that looked like me. But Portugal, I think it just felt natural. I think there was such a strong expat and immigrant community, which I loved. And so it was nice to see people that looked like me, saw products, stores that had my products for curly hair, for natural hair, for braids. And I loved that. It wasn't like in the back or in a specific neighborhood, like it was just throughout the city of Lisbon, which I really, really loved. So I think, yeah, Portugal, I just felt the most like I could just be me and kind of not get stares, not get side eyes, not get questions. And if the questions were there, they were genuinely curious about am I staying? Like, you know, how long have I been here? All of these things. It was a lot more welcoming, I think, as a Black woman. It just felt a lot more natural. And with Portugal, also, I feel like I didn't experience a lot of blatant racism. A lot of it felt a little bit more subtle, but non-existent for the most part for me. Again, I wasn't there long enough to maybe experience the full diaspora of it, but I think my experience was just more, okay, maybe people might have small assumptions. Again, racism exists everywhere. You're going to experience racism and sexism, but it just depends on the level. It depends on the person. It depends on the scenario. And so specifically with Portugal, I had an instance where my friend and I went to a restaurant and we had paid, but we had stayed to take photos and things like that. And so the waitress, I think, had forgotten that we had paid. And so when we left and we were like waving her goodbye, she's like, wait, did you pay? And we were like, yeah, we paid like 30 minutes ago, ma'am. And it only felt weird because we were at a table near a bunch of white people, specifically white girls, and it felt like they had stayed just as long as we had, and they left with ease, and they were not questioned about it. So the fact that they pointed at me and my friend and were like, hey, wait, did y'all pay? Felt like, whoa, yeah, we paid. Why would we have not paid? And like wave at you as we're leaving. So it was an interesting experience. And so other than that, like, I didn't feel anything like jarring, but that did feel like, okay, that's a little bit slight, a little bit sus. And so you navigate it, you navigate it, you take the good with the bad, you pick your poison, and yeah, you choose your battles. So that was an experience. And the big question is, would I do this again? With Greece and Spain, I'm gonna be honest, no. I would not move there full time, live there long term again. I wouldn't do that. If it was for a job, maybe, or for a specific experience where I know I'm gonna be there for a limited amount of time, sure, absolutely. And I would definitely visit again. I would highly recommend visiting at least. But living, I don't think it's for me. And I don't think that was the best experience for me to live long term. Portugal, absolutely. I think Portugal felt the most at home, and Portugal felt the most second nature to me. And also, like, I just was excited to live there and explore there, and it was different. I was excited to live in all three places, but the level of exploration and feeling of being welcomed, I think, was different in terms of living there long term. So I would definitely do Portugal again. And my final thoughts on all three places, I would just say, if you're thinking of living in any of these places, whether you're a woman, whether you're of color, whether you're both, whether you're not any of those things, I would just say try it. Try it, because you don't know what it can bring. I think it's scary, and it can be just the unknown. The fear of the unknown can really give you pause, and give most people pause, which is fair and valid. But I think if you're curious about it, go visit first. I don't recommend moving anywhere unless you've been there longer term, not even vacation, because that's what I ended up doing with Greece, which again, I can touch on in a different video. But vacationing versus living there long term is a totally different experience. So allow yourself the time, if you're able to live there a little bit long term, just see what it feels like. And again, I didn't even live in Spain or Portugal that long, I would say, but it was still long enough to get that experience. Okay, I'm actually living here. I would just say allow yourself to try it, see if it's for you. Stay safe, of course, find your community. Finding community really helps, and it helps with your experience and making you feel less alone, and integrating yourself with people that are not just expats or immigrants, but also locals. It really helps with that feeling of belonging. I would definitely recommend it for people. I appreciate you all watching my video. This was really fun. If there's any more questions that you have, let me know in the comments. I would love to talk more about my experience. I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now, so if anyone has any questions, any tips too, for me, I'm always constantly learning. So I don't pretend to know all the answers and have everything, but I hope that this was helpful for someone that might be thinking about moving abroad themselves. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.